This video is gonna be a bit different from the videos I usually do. A lot of you have been asking me a few questions about, oh, how am I building my healer? What build I'm following? Who am I copying? And to be honest, what I like to do is usually check out builds from other people and try to think like, oh, why are they building this? Like, what's the gear behind this? Is this gear like feasible? Can I achieve this gear easily? Is this a transition gear? Is this an end game gear? What I need, what makes this gear set works? And I think better than copying any build, because a lot of times you're gonna get a gear that looks, a build that looks insane, it looks amazing, but what you don't realize, it has perfect artifacts, it has like castle, it has a bunch of perfect stones, it has the food, it has like perfect rolls on legendaries, heroics, it has literally all the best chaotics in slot, it has everything maxed out, and until you achieve that, the build doesn't really work because it doesn't reach X point numbers on the equation, let's say like that, because this game has a lot of like let's say you need to reach certain points to be effective on that status, otherwise a lot of times it's mostly useless. It's kind of crazy how it works, but yeah. So with this video, I wanted to help the beginners to understand more like what gears you should be looking for, why you should be looking for that gear, and of course I'm also mostly a beginner healer. While I played healer on the start of tier 1 with Seeker, I swapped real quick for like Darkblight on tier 2, tier 1, tier 2, and now Lunarch on tier 3 on the normal servers, on the South American servers, and on NA I'm playing Oracle for the first time on tier 3. It's been mega fun. I have been learning a lot. I already adapted a lot of my skill, talked to a lot of different oracles and different seekers that have more experience from tier 2 and tier 3 to discuss Theorycraft on skills, skill sets, builds, status, and things like that. So I wanted to cover on this video more for the beginners, like what you should be expecting on gear, what you should be looking forward to on gear, and how you should plan your gear. So the first thing that I think should be said is, if you're a new player, you should not expect to get a bunch of the most expensive gear. It's really hard to get certain field bosses drops, even more if it's Nebula bosses drops. It's entirely dependent on either have a dominant guild, a winning guild on PvP, which is gonna be even harder if you're a new player, or having luck on the RNG drops of the Nebula chest, or on top of that, infinite lucent to buy those mega expensive drops, because the only ones that you can buy are the tradable ones, which comes from PvP bosses on Nebula, and a lot of other things. So I want to first cover that you should be looking for gear sets and options that are cheap for you to start and be effective, and in the long run start looking for more expensive items that maybe you can adapt to your reality, your build, fitting, and like modify to slowly get stronger, or aim towards that very end game build, but you should have a transition when they start, trust me. So the first thing I want to cover is what are the defensives / healer status you should be looking for. So here on the right, I believe you can see them. Let me just confirm that 1 second. You should be able to see, but you cannot see the numbers, but that's fine. So the status, as far as I learned as a healer, you should be avoiding evasion, because evasion has been in a rough spot overall since the end of tier 2, since legendaries got introduced, because it added a lot of hit in the game and it added a lot of damage in the game, and as a healer you cannot depend on an RNG status, because evasion is RNG to not take the damage to survive. You cannot depend on a chance of surviving. You should play with like endurance, because it increases your odds of surviving. So I wouldn't recommend evasion at all. Max health is mega important, because it just makes your life higher and harder to kill, harder to untap, and in this game kills are mega volatile. With that I mean you either get one tapped or you're full health. It's usually that system, there isn't really a between those most of the times. So max health is very important. Magic heavy attack doesn't sound very important, but you can actually do magic heavy on heals, so it ends up helping. Crit chance doesn't matter that much, but magic heavy ends up affecting your heal output quite a bit. Weaken chance doesn't matter that much because you're not going to be doing anything. Buff duration is one of your most important status. You can get that from traits, gear, masteries, perception on the status. You want to stack buff duration the max possible because the buff duration is one of the only status in the game that don't have diminished returns. That means if you stack more, it's gonna always be more effective because it doesn't have the diminished returns, which means if you have 100% buff duration, you have 100% buff duration. You'll double your buffs, your shields duration, and anything related to buffs. So it's insanely important to have this. Have attack damage, I'm not gonna comment because I'm not entirely sure if it works. I didn't do much research on it. Skill damage resistance is one of the most important status as well for tanking. Crit damage resistance is also mega important. We're going to be covering that. Bind resistance and overall CC's resistance can be mega important. I'm going to just talk a little bit over it. Weaken resistance can guarantee that you don't get lightning fusion and some other skills like that can cut your healing and other things. Guaranteed to hit you like curses. Weaken resistance is one of the most important resistances. You can build around other resistance like bind resistance, silence resistance. The other ones are not that important, but you can build around those. A little bit of collision resistance as well. Those can help you a lot versus like CCs and overall debuffs. So don't sleep on those. Even more on the weaken resistance is one of the most important status as far as I have learned in tests, including playing, because I used to play versus healers, right? Because I was a curse bomber. On tier 3, it changed it quite a bit. I don't see that weaken resistance needing to be omega high. Of course, there is scorpions that play with weaken chance, but honestly, I personally, I could be wrong here, feel like they kill you regardless, to be honest. But moving on. Attack speed sounds like it's not important, but it's actually pretty important. You don't need infinite amounts or a lot of it. You're probably gonna get like from Da Vinci with your party linker if you're playing static and other things. So you don't have to ultra worry, but it's good to have a little bit because attack speed will affect how fast your heals come out, how fast your skill animations go, and how fast your cast bar is gonna cast. So attack speed ends up being very important for healers. It's kind of funny. Endurances is the thing that prevents crits or diminish the chances of getting crit. Is mega important, but depending on the build, you can try to work around it with other status. The same goes the other way around. You can work mostly on endurance and avoid other status. Just depends on your build path in the end. Damage reduction is important, but honestly, the status that is mostly for scorpions. It can be used against many scenarios though, and it's a very solid one. However, it's kind of hard to build. Of your status, the most important one is gonna be Fortitude. This is basically your main core status. Perception is mega important, even though it looks like it's more for the hit. It actually increases your buff duration, and on top of that, if you're using certain sets of items, it increases your endurances, which makes it a very important core status. Wisdom is pretty important, but not that important, but it is important because increased wisdom will give you cooldown reduction, which is also core status. Strength is pretty important because it will increase your defense overall, as well, just similar to Fortitude, but also your HP, and on top of that, is gonna increase your heavy attack at certain points. So it ends up in those end up being your most important status. Dexterity is the least important status, however, it does help a little bit with dex speed and the buff duration, if I'm not mistaken, but it's really the least important status out of all four. Alright, moving on. Max mana is actually important, even more on Oracle, because the more mana you have, the more your heal's gonna heal due to passives, and the more your shield's gonna shield due to passives. So max mana actually ends up being a pretty important core status. Let's see, already covered this. I think overall that's it. The only status that came to my mind right now that I didn't cover is Heavy Attack Evasion, which was mega popular by the end of tier 2. It was one status that completely denied certain classes from doing damage. and it was a viable option to just stack a bunch of heavy attack evasion in favor of instead of endurance or certain other status. However, as of tier 3, as of legendary, from what I have seen, even though it is still mega effective to stack upwards 1.5 to 1.6 thousand heavy attack evasion, right now people can achieve upwards to 2.2 heavy attack chance if they're mostly focused on heavy. However, if you do focus on heavy evasion, you're gonna be denying those crit focus builds though. But yeah, just covering over all these status. I'm sorry this took a while, but I think with what I said, you have a decent idea now of like what status are important, what works on what, and like what you should be looking for on items, right? So talk about items, let's cover some things. First things, I'm not gonna be covering Seeker, you should already know that because I have been playing Oracle, but I'm gonna just skim over a little bit to help you out. So for tier 2, the only weapons that you should be looking for, honestly, is the Azure Nexus for the orb, Overture for the one, and I don't know how to say the name of the thing for the one as well on tier 2. Those are your only viable options when it comes to skills / status for a weapon. When it comes to the bow, I'm just gonna cover it really quick. I believe the only bow that was viable here was Lunar Radiance. I'm quite sure that's the only one people used. And the Deluzhnoa one at certain points people used, but I think mostly it's the Lunar one. And nowadays what people are using is the Aelon one. Okay, just real quick covering the bow. When it comes to tier 3, the only options is really the field bosses. Excavator is really not the best option in my opinion, but it is an option if you have it. Talos Orb is amazing, and it is a very good option if you can achieve it, but be aware those two are field boss drops, so they are very hard to achieve. That's why I say to scope for the tier 2. Those two are mega easy to get, and they will do decently enough for PvP and PvE. For arc bosses, of course, what you're going to be looking is Squarty on both slots, the weapon and the orb. It's just hard because, well, it's an arc boss, but if you can achieve it, I'm gonna go to the next topic, which is the heroic / legendaries. So on the heroic / legendaries, I just put everything here to display, but be aware you can only use one heroic per slot, so only one weapon, only one gear, only one accessory. I just put both here so you can see the options, right? But okay, now that you understand that, what I recommend personally, the one is the one that is more guaranteed in case orb gets nerfed, which probably will get nerfed. One is the one that is like your safest investment. So if you want to invest into the one and the orb gets nerfed, you can swap the orb for a bow and you keep the investment on your legendary or like one and you're gonna be fine. So the orb has some risk. However, it's important to note here that if you invest into the orb, your shields on the orb are gonna be higher. Therefore, it's usually, in my opinion, more important to go to the orb, but the one can be the safer investment. I would build around your arc boss if you have it, or your field boss, because weapons have base status. Tier 2, tier 3, and arc bosses have different base status, and you always want to aim for the highest base status possible. So what I'm trying to say is, if you have a tier 3 field boss drop, or an arc boss arc boss drop, let's say you have a Quarty one or an excavator one, then I recommend getting the other one, that being the orb, as your legendary, because that means you can extract the tier 2 orb passive, which is the Azure Nexus, and put on your orb. That means you're gonna have a decent passive on your orb, and at the same time you're gonna have a decent weapon on your one, which allow you to have both weapons as good status for your skills, which is a very important thing, having high status on both weapons. So I always recommend checking out what you have and building the opposite of it. So if you had Cardio or Orb or Talos Orb, I would recommend building the one instead for the heroic. So you can put like Overture or Kazazazaza, this one here, on the passive slot for the legendary, the heroic. So you could have, again, a strong passive on the heroic and a strong base weapon on the orb. You know, you get the idea. So that's my opinion for the weapons. You should always build based on what you have. But overall, the wand is the safest guess in case orb gets nerfed. Now let's go for the armor pieces. You can only get one, like I said. Usually, the cloak is for DPS, tanks is everyone, and gloves are also for DPS. Legs I have seen on tanks. I didn't see much on the helmet / shoes overall. But for healers, what I saw the most was legendary chest, mostly because it has buff duration here on the possible heroic effects. I'm quite sure it's the only one that has buff duration on the chest, which is mega important for healers. Like I said, one of the most important status. And you can get like max health, max mana, you can even get endurance here, etc. But yeah, so this is one of the heroics that I saw the most. And the other options, like I said, the cloak, because it gives attack speed, which does help you, but more than that, more important than that, is gives skill, damage, resistance, which is one of the best defensive status in the game, as well as having pretty decent heroic effect rolls here. When it comes to weapons and armors and accessories, one of the most important things that you gotta be looking for is to fit your build. What that means is, for example, usually you're going to be lacking on certain status depending on your build. And what most people seem to aim for, comfort, is trying to get fortitude in every single one of your possible status. Oh, you cannot get on the cloak, my bad. But on the armor, on the accessories here, what people always try to aim for, from my experience checking a bunch of quest logs and for myself, because I actually had to do that, was looking for fortitude, because like I said, it's one of your most important status, and it's kind of annoying to get, because fortitude is one of the status that doesn't really exist in most weapons, and on the defensive ones, at least for our healers. And on top of that, it's only on specific sets of armors, which is usually more focused on the tanking aspect, which is fine, but it struggles if you're trying to mix on a healing set. So you try to get fortitude in accessories and other sets, other status like the heroic, so you can compensate for the set, your armor set, not having fortitude. So that's what most people try to aim for. I already covered the gear, the armor itself, so the chest and the cloak. Now, on the accessories, what most people seem to run is the earrings, because it gives perception, which combos with auric, like I already mentioned, but it also gives endurance, and it can give you a bunch of extra status compared to any of the other earrings that you would get on tier 3, in tier 2. And the bracelet, because we don't really have that many good bracelets. We have bracelets that are decent for at least endurance, like the Prayer Beads and the Radiance Light, which I'm not gonna find here, but yeah, I'm gonna look for it here. Radiance Chains, those two are the decent ones for the endurance. But when it comes to trying to build something different with heavy attack evasion, Shackle Lights is our only option, because we don't have anything else on tier 3, and even tier 2 that we can do something with. So keep in mind that this is what people usually pick on their heroics. I just wanted to cover that. Now let's cover a little bit of the armor sets, because I think it's important. For the tier 2 armor set, we have Auric. Auric is like one of the best gear sets ever introduced in the game. It was broken on tier 2 and it's still mega viable on tier 3. What Auric does is on 2 pieces, every 10 perception, you get 45 of every endurance, which means if you have 90 perception, you get like 400 of every endurance for free, on top of course the gear. And on top of that, the gear has like 4 lines, 2 being status, and usually 2 being very good defenses, like magic endurance and damage reduction. There's hit chance not that good, hit chance not that good, range endurance, damage reduction. So you can see Auric is mega solid, and there's a reason why people still use 2 pieces of Auric to this day. The best advantage of Auric as well is that basically every piece is droppable from Abyss Dungeons. That means it's mega easy to farm, mega easy to get copies to unlock trades, level up your own trades. It's a tier 2 on tier 3 right now. So Auric is definitely the best thing you should be looking for as a support slash healer right now. It's simply fantastic. Eternal Warlord is a bit more annoying to get because I'm quite sure it doesn't drop from Burning slash Abyss, it's only from Dungeons, so it's a little bit more annoying, but it's another space of set that you can try to complete. I just don't love the status on it. It has some really weird stuff like hit chance, I think it had health regen, yeah, crit hit chance, things like that doesn't really work well compared to Auric. But it's also tier 2, so it's pretty cheap. It's just gonna be a bit annoying to trade because it's like from old dungeons. It's not that easy to get compared to like Auric, which is just farming. So, but if you can combo, you can mix Auric and Internal, you should get a very high endurance for the early game. And even late game, to be honest. The other set that we are looking is still Juggernaut. This is mostly a tank set, but you can see on the Hyper Boost, this is the set that I decided to go for, because it's a set that when you get 4 pieces, it's now giving you 250 endurance on all endurances, which was buffed from last patch, which got magic added on it, which made it even better. And it reduces the heavy attack damage that you take by upwards to 24%, which is a lot. And it's mega important in my opinion. Why I was using it is mostly because right now, if you play against any decent orb, he's always gonna have satellite, which buffs the entire party, and it adds on top of it 20% heavy attack damage to everyone that has the buff. So basically by using Steel Juggernaut, you're 100% denying the buff, the extra damage on you. So this is my personal preference for the Juggernaut. It's because I think the meta right now with satellites justify me using the 4-piece Juggernaut, and on top of that it's a tier 3, which means it has more defense overall and more status overall, even if it's just a little bit. It has more options on the trades, and it's pretty easy to farm as it's a co-op dungeon that is on the current tier, so it's ran a lot, it drops a lot, it's very easy to trade and grab from the market. Overall it's a fantastic set, so this is my pick as a favorite. I am using 4 sets of Steel Juggernaut right now and a legendary chest. But of course, like I said, you can also mix and match. You can do 2 Aurics, 2 Juggernauts. You can always think of different options. I'm just sharing to you the sets that are used as more like healers slash tankish healers. So you can think on your own and try to understand like what you can chase for. The Ethereal one is also a set that is co-op drops, if I'm not mistaken. I'm 99% sure. It's mostly focused on healing, which is a good status, but as an Oracle, most of the time we are focused on shields. However, the healing we do have a lot of healing with Healing Wave, with the Master just healing overall and things like that, right? So don't sleep on it. And on top of it, the best part of Ethereal is the boots. The boots has Fortitude, is the only part of the set, if I'm not mistaken, that has Fortitude, so that's the rough part. And it has Endurance, all Endurance on the status. So for example, if you want to use the Ethereal boots and any other of the second pieces and combo it with Auric, you're gonna get so much Endurance for free. And on top of that, you're gonna get 30% healing. It's a fantastic set combination. 2 Auric, 2 Ethereal is amazing. If you're not gonna run Steel Juggernaut, this is great. And finally, I want to cover the Twilight set. The Twilight set is annoying to get. The hood you can only get from Battleground chests, PvP chests, and Nebula chests, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very annoying to get. The rest of the set is basically field drops as well, so it's all very expensive, all very hard to trade. You're gonna need to like have patience to get it, spend Lucent to get it, and the set itself is really hard to use because while the status on the set overall are okay-ish, they are not focused on a more tankish healer. They're pretty squishy, pretty PvE-ish, but don't take it wrong, it's a fantastic set. 30% shield health and shield received on the current meta for orbs is insanely good. It's like insanely good. However, it's hard because it doesn't have any fortitude and it struggles to build on that. So the only people that usually can afford to build into this have already a bunch of fortitude items, like chests with fortitude, weapons with fortitude, legendary / heroic rings, not rings, sorry, bracelets and earrings with fortitude, field boss drops, or like nebula drops that have fortitude on the accessories, so they can reach upwards to like 70 or 80 fortitude, which makes this set mega hard to use. It's great if you're just doing PvE, but if you want to bring this to PvP, be aware it's way more squishy on the status compared to the other ones that I already showed you. It's way harder to get and trade, and requires way more of like harder pieces to get to combo with it to make it viable so you can survive and keep playing. However, it's a great set, but it's definitely a more focus on endgame and end builds, and require a lot of alternatives to support it to make it work, let's say like that. All right. So with this, I think I covered most of the important parts. I already spoke so much, but I just wanted to cover the gear idea, the status idea. I can do a video in the future talking about skills, masters, build paths that you can probably think of progression. Like I said, I'm no pro healer. I'm still learning. I'm searching, talking to new other healers that have more experience than me, and trying to learn and understand their choices and why they did certain things. I just want to cover what I learned on this video and like what I think of certain things on this video. Real quick, I want to cover just what other options you have. If you don't go for the legendary cloak and you go for the legendary armor, you want to look for the Shroud of the Prophet one, because it gives endurance, have attack evasion, have attack damage resistance, and weaken resistance, which is is one of the best cloaks we had in the game so far for tank / healer. And you can also look for the Cloak of the Blood Moon, because it gives skill damage resist, collision resist, damage reduction, and HP. Personally, out of the two, I prefer Shroud, but I would like to have both in case I need to swap depending on the map, the PvP, and the situation. However, 99% of the times I prefer Shroud, okay? Now let's go over the accessories. For the necklace, you don't really have that much options. You should be using Necklace of the Underworld if you're going for endurance, as the basic necklace. However, if you can, in the long run, you should look for the exceptional grid, but the exceptional grid is a nebula drop, so keep this in mind. It's a nebula drop. It's very hard to get, it's very RNG to get, but it's the only one that has have attack evasion. It has some collision resistance as well, so you're gonna want to stick with the Underworld for now. On the bracelets, I already said the only option for heavy attack evasion is going to be the Heroic. But if you don't have the Heroic, your other option is going to be the Immortal Beads. If you can, though, you might want to get the Radiant Chains, because like I said on the Twilight side, it has fortitude. It has 6 fortitude, so it's one of those rare bracelets that has fortitude and has endurance, so it's really good for the healers / tanks. However, again, this is a nebula drop, so that's why you might want to stick to the beads, because it's very easy to get compared to the radiance. And that's what I'm saying, like on learning your build and learning how to adapt your build and what you should look forward but not aim forward, because it has a lot of RNG behind it. Alright, now on the rings, what you should be looking for, honestly, is Band of the Earthring Grasp. It's mega easy to get. It's like one of the cheapest ones. It has very solid stats overall for a healer. And the second ring that you can be looking for is the Da Vinci. It has fortitude, so it's great. It's a field boss drop, but it's very common drop. A lot of people will drop it. It's very cheap on the market overall if you consider other items. So it's a very solid option. If you want to save up for PvP specifically even more, do Battlegrounds, and you want to save for the Coil of Corruption. It's one of the best PvP rings that you're going to get. You're going to get endurance just like the other things. It has Fortitude and Perception, which is amazing status. It has PvP Heavy Evasion, which is huge. It has 200, one of the hugest have attack evasion status in the game in quantity. And if you have the Luxuosity, you can start looking for some other rings, but on the ring aspect is thankfully not that big. Is the Ring of Falling Dusk, which gives endurances and damage reduction. But like I said, thankfully, well, on the ring aspect, the Nebula one is one of the weakest one compared to the other options that you have, so you don't have to worry too much about it. Thankfully, we are covered with the Earthend Grasp, the Coil of Corruption, and the Da Vinci as defensive rings. They are amazing. Now, when it comes to the earrings, like I said, you might want to go for the legendary Heroic earring because it gives a lot of stats. It's a great defensive earring. But if you cannot, you're probably going to want to look for a refracted light. But be aware, again, Fortitude is Nebula. Or Umbral, again, Fortitude is on Nebula. Those two are Nebula, so it's mega hard to get, which is why I recommend the Heroic, which is much easier to get compared to those two when it comes like to normal progression. If you cannot, your other option probably will be the Sanctified Prayer, which is Perception and Strength and Side Endurance. It's not amazing, but it will cover your build if you're using like Steelheart, Juggernaut, and other things that do already include Endurance. Another option that you can look forward if you have the chance is to get Gilded Granite Teardrops, which also give Endurance. So keeping an eye out for tier 2 earrings, some of them can also be useful on your build. Now when it comes to, sorry, I just remembered on the topic of tier 2, alright, on the topic of tier 2, the necklace also have the Lunar Conjunction, which gives skill damage resistance and cooldown, which is pretty good. If I'm not mistaken, it has this Fortitude, but it doesn't have stats, so it's not worth it. No, I think that's mostly it for the necklace. And on the ring, there's one specific ring I want to cover, which is Band of the Resistance Leader. This ring, even though it doesn't give you status, is amazing. It's gonna give you health, damage reduction, heavy attack evasion, and endurance. A very, very solid ring if you already have the status that you need for your builds, alright? On the same topic of rings, you can also use this Fortified Honor Promise Signet, which gives endurance if you don't have the second ring yet. So let's say you're playing with 2 rings, right? You only have this band of the first one. You can use that other one until you have a better ring on the tier 2, right? Keep that in mind. And I just want to cover belts finally. If you don't have a lot of resources, which is normal for new players, you're gonna want to be using two Echoings, which is very easy to get. Gives endurance, damage reduction, really good status. For the starting belt, that's what I'm using right now. You want to progress it to the steadfast pledge, but it is a field drop, so it's a bit harder, / more annoying. If you're not going explicit for an endurance build, it has heavy attack evasion, like you said. Again, you gotta think of your builds. If you're gonna build endurance, what has more endurance, what makes more sense. If you're gonna avoid endurance and a bit more crit damage resistance, heavy attack evasion, skill damage resistance, then you wanna look for other drops like this. Usually you're gonna be wanting to use those type of different alternatives other than endurance when you're gonna be running sets that don't have a lot of endurance, like Twilight, so it's more end game stuff. And again, if you want to get the best of the best, is the Belt of the Clutching Fear. But again, it's a Nebula drop, it's RNG, it has Fortitude, skill damage resistance, heavy attack evasion. So you can see the pattern and why I'm saying that Twilight is not very viable for you on the early / mid game. It's a very end game gear set because it requires a lot of Fortitude to make it work, a lot of alternative status that you need, and it's very hard to get those without literally either spending a lot, and even then it's gonna be mega hard, or having insane luck to hit those drops on the RNG bags, right? That's why I don't recommend Twilight for new players right now. Alright, on the tier 2 belts, there are some tier 2 belts that are pretty decent that gives either endurance or skill damage resistance. That you can look out, but personally you should be looking for those tier 3 ones. On this status, I want to clear something that is again very important. If you're using Auric, you want to reach at least 70 to 80 to 90 on perception. If you're using any healer overall, you want to always be on 70 to 80 fortitude, alright? And if you're playing with Orb as our Oracle, you always want to have at least 70 wisdom and 70 perception, so you can use your satellite and buff your damage for your party on the heavy damage attack. Sorry guys, it's a lot. I know this is quite long, but trust me, I'm putting a lot of information here for you guys. On the artifacts, there really isn't much to think. I'm just gonna cover it really quick. What you're gonna want is Grid Seeker. You're gonna want the 6 set because it's gonna give you endurance, CC resistance, and skill damage resistance. On the first node here, what you're gonna be aiming for most part of the time is gonna be usually max magic and heavy attack chance, and like max damage. Something like this is usually gonna be your best guess on the first slot. On the second slot, you get quite a bit of options, but of course what you're going to be looking mostly here is going to be just endurance, and then either melee, magic, or ranged endurance. This is one of your best choices. Or you can go for evasion, heavy attack evasion, and one of the specific heavy attack evasions like melee, magic, whatever it is, right? When it comes to the accessory of aggression here, on the solar one, you don't have to worry too much because it's all CC, but if you want to look for something, you probably want to look for CC chance overall, and either sleep or weaken, depending on what you're using on your bar. And if you are using Seeker, you might be using Tornado, you might want to look for collision chance if I'm not mistaken, but that's about it. On the resistance, what you want to look is always for the CC resistance and weaken resistance, or bind resistance, or silence resistance, or collision resistance, and a combination of those. But CC resistance should be your priority with weaken resistance. That's what I always try to aim for. When it comes to this one, what I like to look for is the same thing, CC resistance, either max mana or mana regen is not that important, healing, stamina regen is nice, or bind resistance, weaken resistance. Personally, I always aim for weaken resistance and CC resistance as my priority, like I said. And for the third one, I get any of the good ones that I could get, max mana, I already said like max stamina, mana regen, stamina regen, or any of the other resistance that are useful like silence resistance, collision resistance, bind resistance. Alright, for the last slot, what I want to talk about is the same one. You're going to be wanting versus resistance and weaken resistance and any of the other resistance. However, if you want to aim also for a little bit of heavy attack, you can. It's just really not priority. What you can aim here that is going to help you a lot, depending on your build, is going to of course be the endurance and any of the other specific endurance, or heavy attack evasion and any of the other specific heavy attack evasions. But again, here, I personally would always aim for the CC resistance and weaken resistance. That's my picks. When it comes to the weapon runes, you always want to be getting strength because it's going to give you crit damage resistance. You want to always pick this in your runes, regardless of what you're using. On the runes here, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing a flat-out build with endurances, you're going to want to pick the endurances that are missing or that you might need to overstack, like melee and magic, because range doesn't affect that much. Or you want to go for magic heavy attack or melee heavy attack evasion, or you can go even for max health or skill or max mana, depending on your very specific niche build. Like I said, some builds can avoid endurances and focus on having like critical damage resistance on the runes, on the heroic weapons, and other things like that. On the support, you can always here pick either weaken resistance, silence resistance, bind resistance if it has, or skill damage resistance, or more healing, or more shield. Those are usually your picks, or skill healing over time if you're using the bow. On the weapon, you're gonna be wanting to be using heavy attack magic, or skill damage boost, or most of the times, and the most important thing, buff duration. You always want to put buff duration. So those are the options that you should be aiming for. I think buff duration is only on the weapon, if I'm not mistaken, I'm almost entirely sure. And if you can get chaotic runes, you should aim for the same stats that I just mentioned. The most important one probably is buff duration though. Alright. Now, when it comes to the accessories and other things, what I recommend is, I don't have it set here, but it's the same thing I said. For all of those, you should be looking for resistances, shield durations, weaken, shield increase, health, healing increase, healing over time increase if you're using bow, magic have attack damage, for heavy on healings, or if you can substitute that on chaotics for like endurances or heavy attack evasions, max mana, max HP, depending on your build setup, go for it. That's mostly about it. I think I cover everything when it comes to builds and like concepts of builds. I'm gonna waste more time in the future making a proper video with like a bunch of different builds that you can go for, and you can pick on those based on what you think fits your situation, what you like on the status, or what exists like on your inventory, because it's gonna depend a lot on that, right? But this video was more to cover like the idea behind all those items. I'm gonna leave this quest log in the description. It's very simple, just to so you can have a cheat spread, a quick quest log sheet to see gears that might be relevant for you. I know the video is quite long, but I hope this helped you to understand the current gear sets on tier 3 with options on tier 2, and explain a little bit of like my vision on healers and what I think of like building the class and other things like that. I'm running out of voice because it's the third video that I'm recording, so I hope you enjoyed. I hope this was helpful to you in some way. Thank you for watching. See ya, guys. I'm dying. Holy.